Hello everyone, Spear here, welcome to the channel. Today we're heading into a deep dive for the Salah versus Haaland dilemma that is weighing oh so heavily on every FPL manager's mind. Do you need both? Is one better than the other? What do they allow? We find out right now within this very video. Without further ado, let's get on with it. First of all, we have to look at the key stats for these two guys. So all of Haaland's expected goal involvement, expected goals, and goal stats are better, quite significantly so. Everything is adjusted here for per 90 to make things easier. Just looking at those numbers without adjusting per 90 wouldn't be very useful at all, really. He's almost twice as likely to score per shot based off this data as Haaland, and is more accurate with his shooting, and has more shots per game. He also shoots significantly closer to goal, and you've got to think about minutes and age as well. Though I appreciate those minutes there are a little better than Haaland's. Haaland's been new to the team over the past 2 seasons, and Salah's been set in that team for quite a while. Salah is now 32, whilst Haaland is 24. Generally speaking, in football, past 30, stats generally stay the same or regress, whilst for those in their mid-20s and lower who are footballers, there's the potential to even improve on those stats as well. I would also mention that given the lack of depth at striker for Man City, that Haaland gets even more minutes this season too, if he stays fit. And with Haaland, you just feel as though there's less competition for his spot than there is for Salah and those attacking positions at Liverpool. Though I appreciate on the right wing, they have less competition than at left wing and striker, of course. But how does this transition into FPL? And this is where Salah gains back some ground. So he does actually get an extra point for a goal. He gets an extra point for a clean sheet too, because of his classification basically as a midfielder. However, even with the old BPS system from last year, the BPS system, remember, is what dictates whether or not a player gets bonus points, and if so, how many at the end of each game. You can see that I've calculated it per 90 for that BPS stat. It's significantly better for Haaland, 28. Salah's 22 per 90. The next two there I've included very specifically because they are new this year. The fouls drawn per 90, again, which I calculated, and then also shots on target from the last graphic I showed you there. Again, slightly favour Haaland for that, but all that means is that his BPS was already better, and those two additional stats favour him again. And then lastly, the BPS per goal is much better for a forward as well. So despite Salah getting an extra point for a goal, the potential for those goals transitioning into bonus points benefits Haaland more. One thing I did forget to mention though here was Salah's price. And what I want to say about Salah's price versus Haaland is, with Haaland, we can kind of all agree that he is the best striker in the game. The second best asset is probably Isak. And the third best asset is Solanke, or one of the 6 million forwards, right? It probably is Solanke and then one of the 6 million forwards. So in that case, everyone will have Isak. Then you're either going down to a 7.5 or a 6.0. None of the rest are really worth it. So you're effectively saving either 7.5 million by going with Salah over Haaland, or you're saving 9 million, okay, depending on how you look at it. But it's not going to be that everyone goes Watkins, for example. I just don't see that. Okay, on to fixtures and teams, and I'll spend a little bit of time on this slide. So this actually favors Salah as a whole. To explain some things on this screen, TXG, which you're seeing next to the sword there, and I'll just reduce the size of me there. There you go. TXG, which is next to the sword there, is the total expected goals for the team, or team expected goals, is what I've put there. So you're seeing that Man City's is actually worse off last season than Liverpool's. However, it's a different manager, remember, for that. I also forgot to mention those Haaland versus Salah stats were averaged over the past 2 seasons as well. I thought that was more significant than just doing 1 season, since they both played in the Premier League for 2 seasons now. As in, that's the max we could get out of Haaland. The OXGA stat that you're seeing there is a stat that some of you will know if you subscribe to me, which you should be, from my previous videos. That one's constructed by me. So that is that OXGA stat at the top left and right that you're seeing with the wall icon, each club. That is the opposition's average non-penalty expected goals against per game. So how many their opposition on average is expected to concede per game in the first 18. And I know first 18 isn't great, hence why in the bottom left you'll see I've done those for the first 5 fixtures and the first 10, because I think that's much better, right? But I did want to do it overall just to keep some continuity. So you can see in the bottom left, the first 5 actually significantly favours Liverpool. Liverpool, it's by more than 0.22 goals per game in terms of ease of fixture. And then after that, the first 10, there's no significant distance. I think a 0.02 isn't a significant difference in the eyes of the stats and data and science, right? Yeah, other things I've maybe not mentioned as well. Oh yeah, the table. The table, of course. So the table, you'll see the stats individually for each fixture. So what I've done there is I've gone to the last season's games, unless they're promoted sides, in which case I've synthesized the stat based upon how poor I reckon they will do. But other than that, all the teams from last year, I've averaged out their non-penalty expected goals conceded at home and away on average. So you're getting specific stats based upon whether Man City and Liverpool are playing them away or at home. So obviously the low number is better there. Yeah. So no, sorry, what am I talking about? A high number is better there. Okay, I don't know why I said a low number. A high number is better there. There isn't actually a stat on this screen where a high number isn't actually better, just to give you a heads up on that. The lowest row on this screen, so I'll just point the lowest row out for you here. The lowest row actually signifies the difference between the two. So if it's in navy blue and light blue, then that means it favours Man City. If it's in red and yellow, that means it favours Liverpool. Down at the bottom here, you're seeing those OXGA stats for their first 5 fixtures and then their first 10, as we mentioned. And then also the captaincy figures here. So the captaincy figures here, what you're seeing is that for the first 5, it favours Salah, actually, in the first 3 to 4, if you isolate the fixture alone. Obviously, we're not considering things like new manager, set manager, Haaland's better stats. But if you just isolate the fixture, Salah actually has 3 to 4 better fixtures. And I say 3 to 4 because there is one, in my opinion, just one debatable one there. And that is the Man United away versus West Ham away. Man United away, statistically, last season was actually easier for an attack than West Ham away, which is crazy. I think if we think about those teams at their best, with all their team fully fit, it probably is an easier fixture for Haaland, that one against West Ham away. But statistically, I've kept it up there just to gain keep some continuity. But I have accommodated it into the captaincy stat there at the bottom there. So you've seen down here that it is 3 to 4 favour Salah and 1 to 2 for Haaland. In my opinion, probably 2 for Haaland, 3 for Salah there. As that progresses over the first 10, so up to this fixture here, you're seeing that evens out a little bit. But even then, the 6th fixture, you know, I think that easily favours Salah because it's Wolves away versus Newcastle away. And then it starts to turn from game week 7 onwards towards Haaland. So those of you thinking about wildcarding around that time, it does favour Salah quite heavily before that time in terms of their team's fixtures and the opposition's non-penalty expected goals per 90, depending upon whether that's home or away. I've already accounted for that. Some things to consider, because I think that too many people just focus on stats only, and I like to think that the content you see on my channel is a combination of an understanding of football and the statistics that go along with it, rather than just one or the other, which you'll see on a lot of other channels. First of all, a couple of things to consider. So Liverpool first. Slot is new there, right? So there's very little to go off for how well they are going to do competitively under him after such a long reign under Klopp. That's a big transition. And there's a lot of different characters in that dressing room that have to then adapt to a new manager, a new style, and a new club dynamic. All we have really so far for them is preseason data, which we can of course use, but everyone knows that preseason data when it comes to competitive football isn't the best, and rarely, in fact, does it come to fruition and transition from preseason form to actual competitive form. But obviously it is something to go off, and it certainly is some sort of factor. It's just probably not the most important one. Secondly, you got to remember that the total the team XG stat there per game of 2.31, that's under Klopp, and I expect that's to regress to below Pep's reign at Man City's, which is the 2.16 you've seen over the past season. For Man City, things to consider in the football terms: the team has been slow back. There's been a lot of national, global escapades for those individuals going to play for their countries around the world in Copa America and, of course, the Euros, and a lot of them are late back. So that will affect them. They also historically start a little bit slowly for the season as well. But I do think that TXG stat is more revealing than it is for Slot's team there. Yeah. There's some interesting stuff there, I think. Now we go on to the part that I'm sure many of you have been waiting for. We're going to go into some deep dives into what drafts could potentially look like and what the key differences are there, what you're gaining and what you're losing as well. Okay, I've tried to, again, keep some continuity between each draft, so you're only seeing key differences based upon maxing out our funds and changing from there on out. So to compare drafts first, we're going to go through a low risk section. So yeah, what I want to say about the low risk section is basically the vast majority, at least 14 of, sometimes 15 of the players are going to be nailed on players, including the bench as well. One thing to mention here is that you'll see Elanga, I think, one or two times. The reason that Elanga is included, before anyone complains, why haven't you got ESR there, Emile Smith-Rowe, or why haven't you got Minte there? I'm only going to use players in these drafts that have stats that we can use from the Premier League in recent years. So you're not going to see Nkunku, you're not going to see Emile Smith-Rowe, you're not going to see Armstrong, because these players' stats, you're not going to see Minte, because these players' stats, we don't have anything to go off for the Premier League. Emile Smith-Rowe's stats, for example, you'd have to go 3 seasons back to get those stats. That's too far to give a reliable source. So we're not going to do that. We're going to use reliable player data and our understanding of their performances in recent years as well. So we have a bit of both worlds. So I've put Elanga in there. It can be any 5.5 though, but his stats were some of the best for 5.5s, and you expect him to start at least the first couple of game weeks, even with the threat of Jota signing. It's not Diogo Jota, it's a different Jota for Nottingham Forest. So again, that could be there could be Pereira if you wanted, but Elanga's stats were better, hence why I've included him. But I just wanted to explain that before I get people complaining that I haven't put an optimal pick there. In actual terms, for stats, it is an optimal pick for the purposes of these comparisons. But I digress. To compare all the drafts, I think first for each section, for the low risk section and the high risk section, we have to look at one involving both players. So you're seeing Haaland and Salah here. I'll just change so I can point to them. So you're seeing Haaland and Salah here. So we're going to look at 3 low-risk drafts. So one involving both, which is this current one involving only Salah, and one involving only Haaland. So you can see here there's lots of safe picks in the duo draft. The only sacrifice you have to actually make, in my opinion, for this sort of draft, for me, considering the fixtures and what we know about these players, is the light defense. And even then, if you look at this defense, I mean, you're not worrying going into the start of the season, really, are you? And remember, Pinnock could be Collins as well for Brentford. And then you've got Howard Bellis to cover off Pinnock's bad fixtures. You've got Robinson to come in when either of Murillo or Mikolenko's fixtures are not so great. You've even got a rotating keeper there as well. So there's even depth to this squad. despite having both Haaland and Salah. You still have a lot of the key picks here as well. Son, Eze, Isaac, both the big guns. Muniz, you know, is the next best pick after Solanke, and that's the other big sacrifice for this one. I would say it's the Solanke and it's the light defense. Yeah, what you could do here as well is something I will mention for all these drafts, but it's something that I've gone against in recent times when I've been drafting for the new season, and that is going with Brennan Johnson over Heung-min Son. Heung-min Son appears in all of my drafts here, and if you want to ask why, you're welcome to. I don't think I need to mention why should have been PFA Player of the Year a few years ago, Heung-min Son. With the stats he produces, the quality of player he is, the elite finisher he is, and the 2 fixtures he has with penalties, why we need to rationalise that pick. I think he is easily the best premium pick in midfield. So you'll see him pop up more so than you will Saka. Saka will be the next one to come up after Salah and Son. Okay? But you could, if you wanted to, go with Brennan Johnson over Son. And that, for this draft, would allow you to, would give you 3.5 million. That would give you 1.5 for Muniz to Solanke, another and another 2 million to upgrade one of these defenders to a premium. You could even downgrade someone on your bench and get Trent for one of those as well. So it is an option here that I'm just mentioning to you, but I don't like the trade-off from Son down to Johnson personally. But for this particular draft, when you have both of them, I do think it's more viable, especially since you don't even have Solanke in this one anyway. So, yeah. So now we'll look at the individual ones and compare them to that one we've just seen, right? So first of all, we'll get into the nitty gritty. So I've got all the stats here for you. This took a long time, this part. So I've gone in and looked at the XGI per 90s and goal involvement per 90s of each player last season, okay? So what you're seeing here is the drop-off. I will say as well, Solanke stats, I think we will see an improvement in his stats, so maybe this drop-off isn't as big for that one. But first off is the Salah versus both drafts. So what we're comparing is Salah only versus Salah and Haaland. So the Salah only draft, which you're about to see, versus the double one we've just had. Yes, so you can see you're saving already 7.5 million to spend at your leisure, because as you just saw, we had Muniz in the team and Isaac. So that means that if we downgraded Haaland, there's only one choice, and that is Solanke. So that means we save 7.5 million. Your other option, if you wanted to go even further, would be something like Chris Wood. The reason I've gone Muniz over Chris Wood for now in these drafts is because Muniz has a consistent stats over a prolonged period, whilst Wood massively overperformed versus his norm over previous years. Again, Elanga could be anyone here, but I digress. You can see just what can be done. So Elanga becomes Saka, which is pretty crazy, right? He can be moved to Saka. You then have Murillo to Trent, which obviously is a big upgrade as well, or any 4.5 to Trent. And you have a smaller upgrade as well in your defense, for example, a 4.5 to a Munoz. You could even, if you wanted to, downgrade your bench keeper and upgrade your base keeper to a Raya or an Alisson or something like that. But that's basically what it allows you to do. And as you can see, on average, since all the rest of the players in the drafts are the same, which is why I did it like that, you can see that actually the expected goal involvement per 90 significantly increases, and the goal involvement per 90 slightly increases. Okay? So overall, in actual fact, statistically, this draft, again, only statistically, looks better statistically. I'm not saying that it is. I'm just saying that if we analyze it in that method, and we'll talk about the football versus the stats as we go through this too. I think everyone can agree that those are all significant upgrades. Maybe only the Mikalenko to Munoz upgrade isn't that big, but everything else is a big upgrade. But obviously, you're sacrificing Haaland to get there. So let's look at that draft and what it looks like in person. As you can see, you've got a lot of depth again. You've got 2 defenders who you're going to start all the time, rotating keepers. You know, you've got a lot of flexibility in midfield, as you can see. You could argue you've even got a lot of flexibility up front. Apart from Haaland, you've got a lot of flexibility up front. yeah, it's a really nice balance for this team. And again, you could even downgrade Saka if you wanted to someone else, like a Gordon, and then put another 2.5 mil in your defense and get a Vardiol and get a new keeper, for example. So you get a lot of funds from going Salah only. And for low risk players, it's not a bad team at all to have Son, Eze, Salah, Saka, Isaac, Solanke, and Muniz as your starting front seven. Again, you can downgrade stuff on your bench. You can downgrade Saka to someone that's still very reliable like Gordon, and upgrade the defense again and have Vardiol and Porro and things like that. So it is a nice looking team. And in my opinion, actually, this front seven you're seeing here, you could argue are the best picks apart from Haaland to start the season for potential in terms of goal involvement when combined with expected minutes, is what I was going to say there, when combined with expected minutes. What's nice is you have a 4 out of 4 penalty takers in midfield, Isaac taking pens, and then your only non-pen takers is Muniz with Man United, then 2 promoted sides, and Solanke, who is starring up front for Spurs. So yeah, there's nothing much not to like here. Again, it's just a very safe one. It's a very safe one. There's not many punts there. You can see everybody's very safe. Let's move on now to Haaland versus both. So we just did Salah versus both versus that original draft. Now let's look at Haaland versus both. So with this one, you'll see Jota doesn't appear. That's because he's a high risk pick. So he doesn't appear in this one, but spoiler, he might appear in a later one. Haaland versus both. We go Salah to Gordon, right? Because that's a downgrade that allows us 5 million. And Gordon's a pretty safe pick, right? I know people saying you might not start, but he's probably gonna get at least 60 minutes first game, and then he'll keep playing then on out as he builds up his fitness. You can see we get to upgrade Muniz to Solanke from that first double draft as well. We get to upgrade Murillo to Trent, and we get a big upgrade from Mikolenko jumping up to Porro. So there's lots of great stuff happening here. But in actual fact, when you look at the overall differential, it's actually not that big, and in some cases actually worse. I will say that Solanke's stats skew that a little, and that anyone with a footballing brain knows that Solanke is a better pick in FPL than Muniz, at least right now, right? So the stats don't really reflect what's on offer here. So I would say, again, look at this with more of a, you know, an understanding of the game rather than pure stats for this one, because it is, you know, those changes are very good, but you've got to remember Solanke is newer to is going into a team which is very heavy in terms of firepower and creativity up front in Big Ange's Tottenham Hotspur. As you're about to see as well, this is that draft in person. So we still maintain Elanga from the double draft, remember, because we're comparing both. We're not comparing the Salah versus Haaland right now. We're comparing Haaland only versus both together. You can see there's tremendous depth again. With this one, we do get Solanke and we get Gordon, but we don't have, for example, Saka, where we accommodate Elanga there. But Elanga, again, could be any 5.5. You have a really nice duo in defense that are the two most attacking fullbacks, starting fullbacks for the opening game week, because Robertson's probably going to be not quite fit enough. Yeah, it looks really good, right? A lot of depth. The only issue is no Salah, of course, and the fact that you're kind of dodging the Liverpool attack, which I wouldn't recommend. But you've got a lot of safe picks there. Okay, so looking directly at the two, so you can go back and scroll through those and pause them and have a look and see what you think. But this is looking at both the the Salah only team versus the Haaland only team. So we're comparing the Haaland team on the left with the Salah team on the right, and the difference goes in favor of the Salah only team, actually, quite significantly on XGI as well. You can see that both teams, if we go back to them, where are we here? Both teams maintain Solanke, so that's not a change between the two of them. However, obviously you're trading down because both teams have Solanke and Isaac. That leaves one slot, which is obviously going to be someone like Muniz or Wood. Again, didn't include Wood for the stats because his stats were way above what they usually are, whilst Muniz were pretty consistent. Not that Wood is a bad pick, by the way. Just for the purposes of this sort of analysis, I think that Muniz is the better, more realistic one to look at for statistical analysis when we're combining football aspects with that. I still think Wood's a great pick. So obviously we have to go to a 6 million. The 6 millions are the fourth best picks in that forward slot. So it's Muniz. And look how much that saves you. It's 9 million. So what I'm saying here, first of all, is people will say to you when you're discussing drafts with fellow FPL managers, be they elite or casual or what, anywhere in between in terms of how they play the game, how they perform, it's going to be Muniz or Solanke that you trade down to. I don't see why you would trade down to Watkins. You're only saving 5.5 million, and he has 2 initial fixtures, which I'm not. The West Ham fixture is nice, but the second fixture sucks. Yeah, so it's gonna be one of Solanke or a 6 million. For me, it has to be. There's no doubt in my mind, at least to start the season. We're not starting in game week 3. We're starting in game week 1, so it has to be one of those two. That's what your big comparison is. It's either going to be a 7.5 million saving if it's a Solanke trade out, or a 9 million saving if it's a Wood or Muniz trade out. Which I think gives you a lot of flexibility. If you're someone who likes flexibility and going against the grain, it is an interesting pick to go without Haaland, because as you can see, statistically it's viable. Flexibility-wise, it's very viable, because if you think about it, Haaland's the only outlier past Watkins. There's 5.5 million of no man's land between Watkins and Haaland, where you're effectively putting all those funds. And this is what it allowed you to do, basically. It allowed you to upgrade Elanga to Salah, which is crazy. But then you still got 2 million spare there. So that could be a Gordon to a Saka if you just slightly downgrade a defender, which is what I've done here, just to show you that sort of accommodation. So it's basically that sort of mid-level, a mid-level midfielder to a very premium midfielder. It could be Son for you, but Son's in all my teams right now. Like Saka, like Palmer when he's fit, Foden or De Bruyne when they're fit. So it's a huge upgrade and allows you a big upgrade in defense as well. Yeah, so sorry, and it allows you that Salah to Elanga as well. Elanga to Salah, sorry, I'm a bit confused there. I have included, I forgot to mention, the XGC stat and what that happens to those defenders when we change them, but I don't think it's that relevant. I just included it for fun because I thought it might be interesting to some of you. But interesting that the low risk draft does actually favor Salah, and that's why I've highlighted him in red here as well. Yeah. Okay, now we move on to the high risk zone of drafts, and this is a tasty section. First up is the duo draft. We're squeezing in both players, so Haaland and Salah are coming in here, of course, and it's a debut in my videos for Oscar Bob of Norway, born in Oslo, I think. If Oscar Bob starts, he could be incredible value. And if he starts and even gets an assist, I can see him jumping up 0.1 or 0.2. If he starts and he scores, he's going to be at least 5.2 by the end of game week 1 into game week 2. If he keeps starting, he's going to be incredible value, but that's a gigantic if. It's Guardiola. He loves to rotate, and he loves to rotate innately sometimes, it seems like, just because of the wealth of options, and they have the ability to do that. I see Bob as maybe starting the first 2, but then I can see him getting rotated quite quickly, depending on how he performs. Even if he performs well, he could still get rotated as well. But he's basically vying against Savio, or for some reason, I don't know why you get to change your name on shirts and football shirts for some reason. I don't know why that is. It's very odd to me. Calls himself Savinho, but his name's Savio. If Savio starts playing, then that's a worry. But Bob looks really good in pre-season, and his stats look really good. They're from a very, very small sample size, his stats. And he looks good in pre-season as well. He's performed well, and it really is his place to lose. But I want to just express now how much of a risky pick he is. Hence why he's in the high risk zone, right? He's in the high risk zone. So if you do go with Oscar Bob, you either have a high tolerance for risk or you have depth in your squad to allow for that. This one is high risk, so it doesn't really have that much depth, really, as you can see by the very light bench. I will say that you could downgrade Robinson on the bench here and upgrade Luongo to Rodgers, so you have a bit more depth, or just downgrade Robinson to a 4.0 like Howard Bellis, and then have 0.5 to go Bob to Smith Rowe or Minte, right? So it's actually not that bad to escape Bob if you need to. I also really like this pick here, Quansah. I think he's a great pick. I think if you're not going with Trent, then I'd highly recommend Quansah personally. I actually don't think he's that high a risk a pick, especially as a centre-back. Centre-backs tend to start or not play at all. I think he's worth the risk for sure. It's just whether you already have free Liverpool or not, or you already have Trent or not. I think if you don't have free Liverpool, I would include Quansah as your second or third defender. You know, Canate might play a few games, but I expect Quansah to be benched for those. And all my drafts, as you've seen, go quite deep in terms of the defence. I'm not worried about that at all. And you can accommodate for him as well. If you look at my defender rotations video, you'll see that. You should go watch that after this, if you haven't already. And also, in this one, you could actually sacrifice like Porro to Munoz, which isn't that bad of a sacrifice, to then allow another 0.5 if you want it for the Bob upgrade. And the bench here is a slightly higher risk than the usual ones. So Luongo instead of Winks. We got Barco instead of Howard Bellis. And we've got, I think this is the one draft where we don't have a reserve keeper. So we've got Matt Turner to back up Sells there. But if Murillo starts, again, it's high risk, right? Oh, no, not Murillo. If Miguel starts, they've got about 90 keepers at Forest. I think they're signing more. But if Miguel starts, this is a bit of a worry. So it's high risk, and you could reduce that risk, right? You could go with Henderson, but I think the upside to Nottingham Forest's starting fixtures are better as solo keepers. Same with Barco's upside versus the other 4.0s. So that's why they're there. But again, you could change this, right, if you wanted to do moderate risk. But I quite like this team. And look how much it fits in as well. You have Haaland, Isaac, Muniz, Son, Salah, Eze, then you have Bob, you have a premium defender, you even have a backup 4.5 defender, you have Quansah in there. My only issue with this one is the lack of Solanke, which is a little bit of a worry. You could even go Solanke and Johnson in for Muniz and Son, and then upgrade a lot of the other positions as well if you wanted to with this one. But it's a high-risk draft for a reason, right? Okay, so let's look at the differences as we change this double up on Salah and Haaland high-risk draft into a high-risk Salah-only draft. So you do go from Haaland to Solanke. The drop-off might not be as severe as it looks because of Solanke's improvement under the seen improvement under Big Ange at Spurs. Also, interestingly, you do see that Bob has not significantly better stats than Jota, but they are statistically, I suppose, better. But it's not a reliable amount of data or games to review someone on, both in terms of watching them or the data. So he does look like a great prospect, does Oscar Bob. And he actually, in the first two games, could even get more minutes than Jota in the first two games. After that, though, I do worry for his minutes. So we are using the 2.5 million of that 7.5 to upgrade Bob to Jota, or at least that starting slot Bob to Jota. So that takes away 2.5. We also get to do the basically the best Liverpool triple up you can do to start the game, and that is Quansah to Trent as well, which again costs us 2.5, but we get that big attacking threat from the back, and you also have enough for Mykolenko to Vardiol, which is a huge upgrade as well. Even with all those things, we still have a million in the bank, which I've used to upgrade the first sub, Luongo, to Bob, which gives you that sort of buffer with Jota as well, in case one of them starts to get benched. And we've upgraded from the double up draft for our reserve keeper as well. So we do have cover for Sells in the form of Henderson of Crystal Palace. So what that basically means, your team looks like this, and it is one of my favourite drafts at the minute. But I do worry that there's too much Liverpool and not enough Haaland in this one. So I'm kind of foreshadowing something there. If you want to upgrade as well, you can go even cheaper on the bench. So you could take away up to 1.5 million on your bench here if you want to upgrade even more. But I think up front, you can't upgrade anymore. In midfield, I mean, I suppose you could move up Jota to someone, but that's the reason it's a high-risk draft. Otherwise, it wouldn't be anyway. But what you could do with that 1.5 million or 1 million, if you want to keep, for example, Robinson on your bench, is you could... Actually, you don't even need 500,000, yeah. You could downgrade Bob to Luongo and upgrade Sells to Raya. Sells and Henderson to Raya, for example, would be an interesting one as well. So you actually have an extra million, which we've used in the form of a rotating keeper and Bob, but you can use that anywhere as well on this one. But it looks pretty good, this one, for those of you looking at no Haaland. But it's not in my top 3 drafts, this one, but this is an interesting one, that's for sure. Next up, and I was foreshadowing it a little bit, wasn't I, is Haaland versus both. And this is an interesting one to me. Basically, this whole draft hinges on Jota covering off Salah. As you can see, when he plays, his stats actually aren't that much worse than Salah's. But that's the big if of when he plays, right? Is he going to get 90 minutes? Probably not. And that is the worry with this upcoming draft, is that you have a Diogo Jota in your team who's probably going to play 60 or 70 minutes. And that's not great. Not if you're a fan of 90-minute players and playing like that in FPL. But it's a high-risk draft, hence why he's there. So you go Salah to Jota, saves 5 million. You can go Muniz to Solanke, which is an obvious upgrade, despite the stats not saying that. I appreciate that. Quansah to Trent is a big upgrade, and Mikolenko to Munoz is a semi-decent upgrade, right? And you can see the stats actually versus both are slightly improved, and versus both we get rotating keepers, so you can almost definitely expect some more points than you would have just having one keeper. Okay, so this one's a pretty nice, and this was what it looks like. This is actually close to what my current draft is. Isn't quite my current draft, but it's close to it. I think with Flecken in goal and some other changes, but I don't really want to spoil them. The issue here is Jota for me. And is he going to cover off Salah? Probably not. If we knew Diogo Jota was starting 4 or 5 of the next 5 games, playing 60 plus in every one, I'd be more comfortable with this. But that's the high risk factor of this draft, right? You've got Oscar Bob in there, you've got Diogo Jota in there, so you're kind of relying on those to do very well. Again, for this one, you could downgrade your reserve keeper or Robinson on your bench, and just have Henderson in goal, something like that, and then have 0.5 in the bank for the Oscar Bob upgrade. The nice thing about Jota is he's not difficult to run away from. There's so many players 7.5 and below, and probably the most there's ever been to start a season anyway. So the Jota runaway is not difficult at all. But that's the reason this is a high-risk draft, right? This is a high-risk Haaland draft. So, isolating the two of them, okay, the 2 drafts. And interestingly, with the high-risk draft, the Haaland one is better for attacking numbers. It's worse for goals conceded, but it's better for attacking numbers. And it gives you slightly less depth, but the attacking numbers are actually better for it. And you can see there's only really 3 changes I've done just to give you a better understanding of what the differences are. Save 9 million, but it allows you to go from a starting 5 million midfielder to Salah, and also upgrade your defense by 1 million as well, while still retaining 500,000 in the bank, which you can then use to upgrade Luongo or Winks to Bob anyway. So very interesting, right? It feels like the high risk drafts kind of favor Haaland, whilst the low risk drafts seem to favor Salah, statistically speaking. I do think that all these drafts are very viable. It's just based upon your tolerance for risk, and the risky ones are very risky in positions, but there's still a lot of things that can hold the team together there. And again, the fact of the matter is, with the high risk drafts, you can go even safer, stick 5.5 in the bank to run away from Bob to Smith Rowe or Minty, Pereira, Alanga, Hudson-Odoi, Kamada, etc. It's really not that hard to run away from him. And Jota's very easy to go sideways or downgrade on as well. So I do think they're very interesting to go with those. But it depends upon your risk tolerance, right? It really depends upon your risk tolerance. So this was more to see what you can do with that 7.5, 9 million, 5 million, depending upon your combinations you want to choose. So, in summary then, Liverpool, it's clear, have better fixtures in the short term and the medium term. For people saying, oh, but Man City have Ipswich in game week 2, we are not in game week 2, we're in game week 1, and Liverpool have Ipswich, right? So they both basically have Ipswich. But you can see, you can go back to my graphics and look at those and see Liverpool's fixtures are better. Man City, the more settled team. You could argue Liverpool a bit better pre-season form, but Man City are much more settled, and there's a lot more unknowns under Slot. Yeah. Salah, I just want to make it clear, Salah saves you at least 7.5 million. People who are going Haaland to Watkins, that's crazy to me. I don't advise that at all. It's Haaland to Solanke if you don't have him, or if you do have him, it's Haaland to Wood or Muniz or something like that. So it's effectively 7.5, whichever way you look at it, to be honest with you. You'd have Solanke either way. You've also got to remember Salah does gain an extra point for a goal, does gain a point for a clean sheet. But on the flip side of that, Haaland dominates BPS. Haaland dominates him in just straight up football stats, and is clearly on paper, in isolation, the better captaincy pick if you're not considering fixtures. And you can have both. They're both very, very viable together, whether you're a high risk or low risk manager. I do think that Jota is the next best Liverpool attacker. The rest of them, they're just unknowns, and he probably is worth the slight gamble over Szoboszlai right now, at least. That might change come the season. I don't think you should captain someone like Jota. It should be someone like Haaland or Salah, clearly, from what you can see from the stats in this video. Bob is basically Jota light, and I can see him having more minutes than Jota. So if you don't have one of Haaland or Salah, I do think you've got to take the gamble on one of those to give you some light attacking coverage at decent value. They will lose minutes and they will lose game time, Jota and Bob. And neither one are even guaranteed to start, despite all the preseason escapades and the hype around them. Right now, for me, I'm swaying towards a higher risk no Salah draft, but it really depends. I could end up on a low risk duo draft as well, because I know I can squeeze most of the picks I want in there as well. But I will do a game week 1 mega guide coming up as well. I was going to do a pre-season review, but I think one of the big content creators did one of those. So I don't know if I want to spend 10-15 hours creating something, but one of the big content creators already done it, so it feels a bit pointless. But work got in the way, otherwise I'd have got this video out sooner for you. And I'm looking forward to doing the game week 1 guide and updating all the stats, updating everything to show you more refined picks from those areas. Make sure you've subscribed. If you like my videos, leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you're thinking about for your team as well. And a like not only helps me out, but it helps bookmark the video for you if you want to come back and look at those stats and comparisons. Helps the channel out. Like I said, upcoming in is the game week 1 guide. And it should be pretty tasty. So I will see you then. Enjoy your weeks. Enjoy tinkering with your drafts. It's a great part of the season. It should be a lot of fun. See you guys.